Welcome to Fall Rise Give, a space where we invite you to dig into the real cause of your suffering, looking at opportunities for growth with a change in your beliefs, thoughts, and actions so you can be your true self and be inspired. Join us as we explore life's ups and downs and navigate the twists and turns, sharing stories of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of giving back. Whether you're looking for a change, in recovery, or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your go-to for candid conversations, raw emotions, and a whole lot of heart. Tune in and discover how to fall, rise, and give back on life's extraordinary journey. Fall, Rise, Give, turn struggles into opportunities by being your true self and help others. So we just finished the 4th of July holiday, and last week we talked about Colonel Sanders and how he got, 1,007 no's. And as Kumar and I were talking this week, we said, well, let's talk about some other people that are like famous that have done some things. And the name that popped into our head was Ben Franklin, because that dude has done everything, Kumar. Oh, by the way, welcome to the show, Kumar.
Thank you, Bob. I'm super excited to be here again.
I didn't mean to just start talking there. I mean, it's just one of those things, It's just here we are, got a microphone in front of the guy that used to be a radio guy. Might as well just start talking.
That's totally fine. I think good talking, the better.
So when you mentioned the Ben Franklin thing, I actually went into ChatGTP and I said, how would Ben Franklin and our podcast, Fall, Rise, Give, how could they combine together, right? So can I just tell you that ChatGTP came up with a bunch of different things on how his life and how his challenges and his failures throughout his career fit right into our podcast. All right? So ChatGTP came up with this, okay?
Awesome. So let's hear it.
With Fall, Franklin faced numerous challenges and failures throughout his life. As a young man, he ran away from his brother's printing business, effectively severing family ties. So that was his fall. His rise was, despite these setbacks, Franklin's rise is legendary. Okay, he became a successful printer, author, inventor, and statesman, and his innovations and contributions to society, such as the lightning rod, bifocal glasses, which I have now since I'm 55 years old, basically helped him to achieve great success. His role in drafting the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution further solidified his legacy as a figure in American history. And then the Give, that he's a big believer in giving back to the community. He established the first public library in America, which I didn't know. Founded the University of Pennsylvania, created the first fire department in Philadelphia. His concept of encouraging civil responsibility and mutual involvement among his members. He left a significant portion of his estate to be used for public good, benefiting the cities of Boston and Philadelphia long after his death. That is what ChatGPT came up with after I said we should talk about Ben Franklin into it. So basically, he came up with a fall, with a rise, and with a give. It's amazing. And those things do fit right into what we're talking about each and every week.
Yeah, it does. ChatGPT is amazing, and it does give you lots of facts and lots of information. And so, I think there's a personal side of the story that we should talk about as well for Ben. I mean, everybody knows the Benjamin, right? The $100 bill, and it's a super popular guy. But how did he get there? How did he get to a level of rising? How did he accomplish what he accomplished? I was lucky enough, somehow, I don't know how I ran into this, but back in mid to late 90s, I ended up picking, right when I moved to Seattle, I think, I ended up picking Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and I started reading it. It was fascinating. He's also considered the founding father, not only of the country, but of personal development. And so he had some amazing things that he talked about that he did. So let's talk about that today as well.
Okay.
Let me get into that. But anything else you want to start to go for? 4th of July, the fireworks. How was the weekend?
For me, it was fantastic. So I had all 4 of my kids were here, which was a surprise because I didn't think they all would be here for the 4th of July. And then my mom and stepdad were here as well. And so the cool thing is that my mother got to meet her great granddaughter for the first time, which is cool. And then she also found out from my youngest son that she's going to be a great grandmother again. So within a year and a half, I became a grandpa not only once and twice, but I will be a grandpa for the third time coming up in December.
That's awesome. And like I told you, I want to wait.
Yeah.
I want to
Well,
wait to be a grandpa.
your kids are a
I'm
little
not
bit
quite
younger
ready
than
yet.
mine.
I know, right? Right? Exactly. I want to wait a little bit longer. Maybe about 4 or 5 years. I'll be okay with it.
Right.
But yeah, that's exciting stuff. I think 4th of July really signifies, for me, family time. It's like that Thanksgiving, one of my favorite holidays that we talked about, or Easter. And
Mm-hmm.
4th of July is really about barbecues and picnics and celebrating our freedom. But we have to also give credit to people like Ben Franklin, who actually sacrificed so much to fight against this empirical power, right? The Great Britain. And so it takes a lot of courage to do something big like that. And they all started with just having a vision of being able to, just wanting to freedom to do as they chose. A lot of countries have gone through it. India, where I'm originally from, has gone through it against Britain. And so it's really is a powerful thing, but how we celebrate through fireworks and through family. I was lucky to go to a picnic. It's been going on for 54 years at my friend's compound in the city of Seattle, actually. There's an area called Lake Forest Park, and my friend has 3 homes there. His mom lives there, his brother lives there, and he lives there. He's been living there for over 25 years that I've known him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had this picnic / 4th of July barbecue for the last 54 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been to it a number of times over the last 25 years that I've known my friend, and it was pretty incredible. Well, the sad part of it was we were one of the few youngest people there, and at 55, it was like, wow, this thing is really aging that well. But yeah, incredible food. It's like a potluck. You bring a dish or two, and people brought all sorts of cupcakes, ribs, chicken, hamburgers, obviously on the grill. But yeah, it was a really, really relaxing time. My only part was I did mention the podcast to a friend of mine, and he's big time. He's a American guy, and he's big into the Sanskrit and the mantras and all of this stuff. And here I am being Indian, and I'm more into the English version of the Sanskrits and the chakras and all of that stuff. So that was fascinating discussion that we had.
Right.
But yeah, it was a great way to celebrate. We came home from the picnic, and then we had a barbecue for my son. He has 6 friends over, so we kind of did a double dip of the barbecue ourselves. So that was a great way to relax and hang out this week.
Well, the cool thing about 4th of July, it is steeped in tradition and all that. Because I remember as a kid, we used to go to my mom's cousin's house, and we'd play kickball, and we'd play softball, and we'd have a watermelon seed spitting contest. And we'd do a lot of those things, and it was every single year. And then I missed that for quite a few years because working in radio, we kind of moved away. So, like my ex-wife and I lived in another community far away from family. And then we started moving closer and closer. And then we started having kids and started doing our own traditions. And as you mentioned, you're part of a 54-year running picnic. And the sad thing is that you mentioned that you guys are one of the younger people at 55 years old. It's too bad that a lot of our traditions like that, like having these family picnics and these family parties, might be, going to the wayside. And I think a lot of that, unfortunately, has to do with, the cell phone that I'm holding in my hand right now. If you notice, when you go out to eat, or me being a bartender, I see people sitting there at the bar, and people, instead of engaging in conversation, they're sitting on their phone, looking at their whatever. And I usually have a smart alecky thing to say, which I know, shocker to you. But if there's a couple of people sitting there and they're texting, I ask them, I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. You guys are texting each other. And then they giggle and they put their phones down, and then they start engaging in conversation again. But I know this isn't what we're going to talk about, but how can we get people like our kids' age and our kids' kids' age and to be a part of, some of that tradition, bring some of those traditions back in, so that way they're not missing out on the opportunity to know how cousin Gertrude is doing, or how, their great nephew from India is doing, you know what I mean? So that way, how are they going to get to know how all of their family members are doing if we don't continue doing some of these things?
Exactly. So there's 2 sides to that coin, right? Number one thing I think is you set an example by putting the phone down yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And then you do invite your kids. So while we were one of the youngest people there, my son did come with us for the first time. And so he's 18. He did come. Another couple, friend of ours, was in the same table area. Again, there's like, tens and twenties of tables out there at this a big picnic, hundreds of people there. Not hundreds of people, maybe a little over 100. But anyway, so there's another teenager there as well. So the people are bringing their kids or their grown kids to these things. And you have the ability to have the dialogue, the conversation. And the host mentioned to my son wanted to leave earlier because he had an engagement with his friends. And he's like, I've known your parents longer than before you were born. And
Right.
it just kind of hit us as like, God, it's amazing. Our son's grown up and we've known this guy for 25 years. And so
Yeah.
it was an amazing thing. It is 4th of July weekend, and summer's finally started in Seattle. It's going to get to the high 80s. I think it hit 90 yesterday, which is pretty abnormal for us. Normally 70, 75 is the way. But weather and the beauty of freedom and all that stuff is pretty awesome. And let's definitely talk about Ben Franklin next.
Okay. Well, let's parlay our way into that. So you mentioned the $100 bill. Of course, I think a lot of people know Ben Franklin as the dude with the long hair that's on the $100 bill, but he's done so many different things to help out not only Boston and Philadelphia, but all of our country.
Yep. Yep. Well, he did that. So he's considered the grandfather of personal development. And in his autobiography, he talks about a narration of his life and all the things that he went through, obviously. But he lays out a very specific and detailed plan of how he went about doing that. So a big part of our thing about helping people rise and live a life that they want to thrive on instead of living just to survive is a big piece in personal development, right? So for us all, and what are the lessons that we can take from somebody like him? So he was committed to self-improvement. He actually had a very structured approach. And I don't know if most people can follow a program like he did, but he certainly came up with 5 different things that he did that were pretty important to talk about. Number 1, he created 13 virtues, and we'll talk about them in a second. And then he had a weekly focus. He focused on each virtue each week. And then he had a daily schedule. This is what I remember from reading the book 25 years ago, is he actually listed these virtues and areas of improvement. And then every day he would give himself a plus sign if he improved these, and or he would give a minus sign if he degraded in one of those areas, or an equal sign if he actually went in and stayed the same. So he actually had a daily assessment or a weekly assessment for doing this kind of work. I remember it being daily. And then after the self-assessment, his big thing was continuous learning. He was an avid reader. He had a lifelong commitment to learning, constantly seeking life through experimentation, experiences, engaging in intellectual discussions. And he became a leader in society because of his intellectual curiosity. So he balanced life in all these areas. So I think what would be worthwhile to do is to dig into a little bit of his personal growth strategies and his virtues. I think those are very popular. So let's talk about those if you want.
Okay, so you'd mentioned about the 13 virtues, and I did read something about that earlier, about he was doing one a week, and as you mentioned, do the plus and the minuses. So as you were telling that story, I did a quick Google search on Franklin Covey or the Franklin Covey planners. I don't know if you remember those at all.
Yeah.
To see if Ben Franklin was part of that, and it didn't really tell me if he was or not. But it went to say that he did do these things and did the check mark and made sure that he checked off his things to make sure that he was getting his plan done. Plan is action, and it may take an action on his plan, which, a lot of life is, and a lot of success is about making sure that you get things done in the certain order,
Yeah, no, agreed. And since you went there, let's talk about the Covey planner, Franklin planner, the Covey planner. I think the Franklin planner was first, and I think Covey bought it and added his system to it. The Franklin planner was a daily activity deal. You set up your schedule for the day. You go through what your tasks are. You prioritize what you're going to do. And so I don't think they were related to Ben Franklin, but it could have been. Somebody followed Franklin's advice and did the daily planner. And I remember in business early on in the early 90s, all these guys would carry around these Franklin planners with their hands, and they're like, oh, these big old things, right? And I was like, what the hell is this? So I ended up buying one too. I couldn't adhere to it. But I did read Covey's book, and Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in it, he actually changed the paradigm to a weekly outlook. Plan your week out on what you're going to accomplish and put in time for personal development, put in time for what he called quadrant 2 activities. What the issue is with the daily activities is you're looking at just the now. Stephen actually came up with 4 different quadrants of activities. One is the immediate things that you have to get done today. Second is the most important activities that you need to get done, but they then may not have to be done immediately. Mm-hmm. Third is activities that need to get done, but they're not that important. They're just fillers in time. And fourth is putting out fires. And like what has to be done immediately. All of a sudden,
right now, right at the moment, yeah.
Right at the moment. And so what happens is if you don't do enough of these planning / strategic, most important quadrant 2 activities, you end up wasting time in quadrant 3 or putting out fires because you didn't plan ahead of time and you have to do the immediate thing. And so he really turned this upside down, and he wrote a great book on prioritization called First Thing First. He basically took one of the chapters out of his book and wrote a whole new book about it. And so prioritization for me has been, for personal development, prioritizing what you're going to spend your time and energy on is really important, especially in business and work, right? So I've used that quite a bit. But tying it back to Franklin and his virtues, let's talk about those virtues if we can for a little bit. So I think it's important to talk about his virtues because they're kind of all over the place, but they kind of encompass every single area of your life as a human being. Number 1 for him was temperance. So temperamental, your emotional stability is really what that is for me. Silence, that's kind of weird, but that's really cool that he was focused on silence, because silence is when we listen, right? But not only listen to others, but to our own deep thoughts. I think it's really important to have reflection. We talked about that before in the past, about really reflecting. If you're going to reflect, that's when you're going to truly to see what your true desires are, how you're really feeling, your level of dissatisfaction with things, your level of reflection on how you want things to go, things like that, right? Order.
Well, let me just stop in here for a second. That's right. That's like when you do your meditation, that's your silence, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For me, my silence is when I go sit in my hammock or when I lay out in my hammock.
Right.
And it's going to sound weird, but sometimes my silence is I have some quiet headphones that I put on when I mow the lawn, and just mowing the lawn, being mindless, but having nothing on puts me in that moment of being in that, even though there's noise in the background and things that it's my silence, and I'm able to expand my thought process when I'm doing something like that.
Yeah, there's a modern word for that. It's called mindfulness.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's been going around for the last 10 years or so, I think. It's being mindful of what you're doing, being present in the moment. There's a book out there called The Power of Now. There's a lot of Buddhist principles around being in the moment, not thinking about the future, which causes anxiety and all sorts of weird situations, or the past, which causes anxiety or depression or whatever issues that may come up from the past. But right. Yeah, silence, reflection, mindfulness are all really critical that he talks about. Next one is order. Orderly things, people talk about who are successful, even in recovery, making your bed in the morning, right? It's a military way. If you come back home, you'll feel much more better about yourself if you make your bed in the morning.
I'd read somewhere that if you make your bed in your morning, at least you got one thing done for the day.
Exactly.
And that was, and honestly, so when Monique and I started dating, that was one of the things I said, we got to make our bed every day. Well, why is that? I said, because at least you accomplished one goal for the day, and then you can build upon the rest of your day from that.
Absolutely. And that's what they talk about in the attitude adjustment program as well. Resolution. We started to talk a little bit about last week about beliefs, right? Resolution about going after your goals. Resolution about making sure that you have the deep down desire to go after that thing. And then he has frugality. Frugality is super important. I was talking to a friend yesterday at a dinner party, and he works with a lot of billionaires. And he actually is writing a book himself, which was surprising to me because I've known my friend for a number of years, and he just talked about it yesterday. And he talked about the cheat code. He works with a lot of billionaires. So my friend is a construction consultant to billionaires who make homes that are worth $20 to $30 million or more. He represents the owners' rights against the architects and the contracting companies and stuff to make sure that all the people that they've hired are doing their job, essentially. Mm-hmm. And these people pay him, tens of thousands of dollars to go on the site to make sure that all the plans and everything is just being working. So he's like the owner's representative. And working with all these billionaires, and he basically said they're very unhappy people until they start to give. And it's really fascinating. He said most of them are very unhappy because they're so frugal. We talked about his love for hockey, and my friend's like, I go, why? How we got there was, I go, I haven't seen you go to the hockey games. I go down there a few times a year. And he's like, well, that's too expensive. And I said, but you're pretty well off to do. He's like, yeah, but rich people don't spend money on things like. But I'm like, that's the key to happiness is experiences. He's like, yeah, but rich people aren't happy. And then he went on to talk about the book. He's like, they're not happy until they start giving. And it's really interesting how key to our happiness, key to the thing that we think about, fall, rise, and give. Once you start to give to others, you start to feel some satisfaction, some gratitude, some ways of valuing your life, giving meaning and purpose to your life. So frugality is something they talked about, industry like business, sincerity, truthfulness, right? Justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and humility. I like to close off with that humility thing. Can you imagine a guy who's so accomplished and so well renowned? He's at the height of society, right? Ben Franklin. And he's talking about practicing humility. To me, that is what great people who are happy do, is they practice humility. When you practice humility, you admit that you are not better than others, that you have something to learn from every situation, every person, and you care about others because you value yourself less when you're humble. You don't think you know it all. You have a curious mind. You're able to go forward in life as a human being, having humanity. And what's really fascinating to me about being humble, we talked about that, right? Sometimes you're humbled in situations. I certainly had a huge ego, and I talked about that and how I needed to be humble. I couldn't be doing this project 30 years ago. I was too full of myself. And getting away from yourself is how you give, and that's when you care, and that's humility is a huge part of that component. Anyway, so I just wanted to highlight that part of it in out of those 13 virtues that here's a guy at the height of the world, and in his book, he's talking about humility.
I personally have a hard time with humility. The funny thing is being a person that was on the radio for as many years as I was, radio is all about, I did talk radio. So a lot of it was talking about my experiences, talking about things that I've done. And then along comes Facebook. And what do you see on Facebook, Kumar? You see on Facebook people talking about the things that they like. Facebook is a chance for people nowadays to it's a bragging post, really. I mean, very rarely do you go on Facebook and somebody says, my life sucks and everything's terrible and everything. People on Facebook show, hey, I just got this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, and I'm just as bad as everybody else when it comes to doing that. Like I try to post things on my Facebook, and it's going to sound weird, but for the memory part of it, because I go back to my Facebook memories all the time, and I look back at things that I did a year ago today, or 10 years ago today, or 15.
Yep.
I've been on Facebook now for 16 years, and it gives me a daily reminder of what I did each of those years ago. And I wish that it was around a long time ago, but then it helps me to center myself and kind of look at where my life was and where my life is. And so even though it's me being a braggart, even though I'm not really trying to be, it's a chance for me to center myself in the future to say, hey, this is where I was then, this is where I'm going now. And it kind of helps me to see the steps that I've taken, even though it's not being humble when you post those things. Does that make any sense? Or
It's funny. You started out by criticizing Facebook, and the fact that you were like, hey, it's your bragger tool.
It is.
And then you're like, I'm not humble because I'm sharing things not with humility, but of joy or happiness or positive things that are happening in my life. I don't mean to be a bragger, but I may come across that way.
Right.
That's not a humble thing to do. And then you started saying, oh, I see all these positive events in my life all these years ago and all of these things. And so it's fascinating to hear you and being present and listening and saying, God, he shifted his attitude around. Like, maybe it's a great tool to remind me of all the happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So everything has a double-sided coin, right? Alcohol is great for socialization. Drugs can be good for entertainment. The problem with these things is they're very addictive.
If you're watching people do that.
They're making you feel so good. Facebook is the same way, right? It's great for connecting with friends like you and I have connected and watch each of their lives, the hammock moments I've been reading about for years or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Watching your life through your changes, your family, you and Monique getting together even before we started talking and all of this stuff. My cousins in India, in Bahrain, I had a cousin in Ukraine studying medicine. All of these things, all these connections. My friend, my little nephew traveling to Singapore a couple of weeks ago. All of these things I get to watch. Now, in a way, we're sharing our happy moments, and that's not a humble thing to do. But the tool can be utilized to also see, hey, somebody posted a picture in the high school, Alexander Ramsey High School, 1987 class photo. I saw
that the other day. Yep.
And my friend Dan Riley and I are sitting next to each other in that photo. And we talked about Dan Riley. He was the guy that originally motivated me or believed in me enough that I would write a book about this type of a topic. And so that's very touching. And a couple of people, it was a very sad moment. We did a little tribute. I did a little tribute post. And a couple of people, including yourself, said, compassionate liking of that particular story. And so there are moments of humility. There are moments, but it is a tool to share our joy, our happiness, and connect with others.
Right.
And I'm okay with it as long as I'm not addicted to it, right? And so the other day, I ran into a quote, but I just want to pause there for a moment while I think of that quote in a second. But everything has a double-sided coin to it. There's good and bad in everything. Everything in moderation, even moderation, right? That's what people say. So it's a tool. It's interesting, but humility really is a powerful tool for us to be ultimately happy and get more of what we want because we're learning in that attitude.
Absolutely. So I want to give you a little kudos from, as I mentioned earlier, that my mother and my stepfather were here in town, and they spent a couple nights, and they were talking about how they listen to the podcast and how they've enjoyed what we've been talking about, and they enjoy especially the banter that you and I have. They said, well, do you guys have this scripted out? Do you guys know what you're going to say? I'm like, no. All of our stuff, we have an idea what we're going to talk about, and everything else is just free flowing. And I said that when we first started doing this, I was a little bit nervous about doing it because committing to a weekly podcast is a big undertaking, as you've mentioned in the past. And I was thinking to myself, I don't know how well we're going to be able to communicate together, how we're going to mesh, and to make this sound professional, you want to make sure you take out the ums and the ahs and the pauses and the awkward, goofy stuff that happens on occasion. And quite honestly, you and I, when we're talking, when we're doing these things, I don't do a lot of editing. I mean, most of the things that I end up cutting out are mistakes that I make. I haven't heard you make one yet. But my stepdad, Dave, said to me, he goes, Kumar is an intense, smart, guy, and he goes, you guys are lucky to work together on something like this. And so I just wanted to share that with you, that he noticed that, that you're a smart guy, and he noticed that you're a good communicator, and you've got some great stories, and you've got opportunities to share those right now. So I just wanted you to know that.
No, I appreciate it. I do. It's taken me years to be a good communicator. We talked about Sarah, the great speaker in my college graduation, and she
Right.
was in Toastmasters, that I was in Toastmasters, and it took me years to learn how to give speeches, and how nervous I used to get in the 7th grade English class to get in front of class. And so you develop these skills. Fear of public speaking is one of the top fears, and I think I've mentioned it a number of times. Toastmasters is one of the biggest personal development organizations in the world, because it helps you communicate with others on an individual basis and also in a group basis. Get over your fear of communicating your thoughts, actions, and the ability to get your point across to get what you want in life. So if you're going to be presenting an idea in a business setting or in a personal setting in a relationship, it's easier to communicate when you learn how to listen, have empathy, all of those things. And so communication is a huge part of it. Toastmasters is the #1 personal development organization that I want to support for everybody. If you get a chance, go out there, and if you want to improve yourself, join Toastmasters. And Ben Franklin obviously did a great job for the country. And the other thing I was going to mention in a quote that I read this week was, we are the average of the 5 people that we interact with the most. I don't know if we talked about that last week or not.
No,
but
we haven't. But I've heard that and then tried to live by that since the first time I heard it 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're hanging out with bottom feeders, you're going to become a bottom feeder. And if you're hanging out with people that are, like we've talked about, billionaires or people that have been successful in life, you're going to be successful just because of the whole helping, the fall, rise, give, the whole give part of just taking in the knowledge of the people that you're around.
Totally agree. And it reminds me of a story back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. I was in college and I was a junior, I think. And a friend of mine is a really smart programmer. He's very athletic. He was a runner, and he came from a very successful family, even though I think his family wasn't very well to do, but his brother, siblings were all very studious and all of this stuff. And he was just an incredible person. He was one of the influential guys in helping me get my computer business degree, a program called MIS, Management Information Systems. And I remember talking to him about something, and he's like, Kumar, one of the biggest problems that you have is you hang out a lot with guys that bring you down. You hang out with us and the guys that are going up in the programming side of things and in successful in business and driven piece, but you hang out with a lot of guys that aren't going anywhere. And this is the guys that I used to go drink and party with. So they were dragging me down, and this kid, 20, 21, 22 years old, had the wisdom to recognize that and tell me in a very constructive way. And here we are, 30 some years later, talking about this college kid giving me this advice. And then me hearing this quote this week on Facebook or wherever I heard it, that we are the average of the 5 most people that we interact with. So pick your friends wisely, pick your associates wisely. It is one of the keys. This is why reading is so important. This is why focusing on personal development, people who are positive, people who tend to care about personal development, people in a program like the Attitude Adjustment Program are very positive. They're in recovery. They're working their tail off. They want a better life. They're focused on spiritual things. They're focused on a higher power. They're focused on how to overcome their addictions or whatever it is, and they're trying to better themselves. And those are the kind of people that you want to be around. And that's why I think it's a huge plug for the Attitude Adjustment Program, is that find a community that allows you to be yourself, allows you to be honest with yourself, allows you to be better than yourself as you are today. It's be happy with where you're at, be grounded, but look for that second chakra, that desire, that creativity of wanting to go after the goal. And then I think we'll bring things back to the chakras again, off and on different topics that we talk about.
Well, I think we will, because all those things tie into everyday life anyway. But I do want to ask a question about, because you mentioned the attitude adjustment program. So how does Ben Franklin and his virtues tie into the attitude adjustment program?
The attitude adjustment program is all about personal growth. It is all about personal development. We drink alcohol for a number of reasons, but the people who are addicted to it are addicted based on one of the famous authors that I read about in the attitude adjustment program for like 50 years. He's a well-renowned author. His name is Chuck C., I think it is. And so Chuck C. wrote a book called A New Pair of Glasses. And in it, he said, we drink to overcome the deficiencies in our life, to numb the pain that we have. If we want to get rid of the pain, we're going to look for growth and personal development. And how do you do that? Just like Toastmasters is for average person to become personal development-wise a better speaker and going deep into yourself and being a very positive experience. Mm-hmm. Attitude adjustment program provides that space for the addict and the alcoholic to be able to go through the personal development program. No man is an island. You can't do things yourself. We just talked about your 5 average people. You are an average of 5 different people. The key is to find a group and a community that you can associate with. Young Entrepreneurs Group is the one for young entrepreneurs. The CEO Club is for certain CEO clubs. There's all sorts of clubs and organizations out there. But I think for the addict and for the alcoholic, the attitude adjustment program is one of the best programs out there. And so to me, how it ties into is, if you want to be in recovery, if you think you have a problem with alcohol, find the nearest attitude adjustment program. Google it, talk to a friend. Their whole thing is around attraction, not promotion. You'll find the right help that you need. Look for Alcoholics Anonymous, the attitude adjustment program that we talk about. And so type in AA, go to a meeting, go learn more about it. It's a great program for people who are in recovery and who want to be better themselves. Go to Toastmasters if you don't have a problem with addiction. Go find a club of personal development. There's all sorts of groups out there that you can go and associate with to better yourself.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fall, Rise, Give, where we explore stories of resilience, growth, and giving back. If you enjoyed today's episode, please visit our website at www.fallrisegive.com. Also, consider subscribing to our podcast on your favorite platform and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you inspiring stories. Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, every fall is a chance to rise, and every rise is an opportunity to give. Until next time, keep falling, rising, and giving. This is Fall, Rise, Give, produced by podcastforhire.com. Thank you for listening.